Hey everybody, so I'm going to be showing you guys how I made this sketch. So this kind of just started off with me doing some random sculpting. I never usually start out with any concept in mind, and I just kind of see what shapes I find. So usually when I'm sculpting, I'll just kind of start with a basic face and see what happens. Because when I'm sculpting, I find that going off of a concept kind of loses my ideas, kind of. So what I prefer to do is just kind of start with the sphere and just put some shapes down and try to react to those and make something cool. So what I'm doing here though is, even though I don't really have a character in mind, I'm just kind of putting down some bony landmarks for a face, because I like sculpting faces. So by starting with things like the brows, eyelids, cheekbones, and the jaw, I can just get a really good start to figure out what I want to do. And later in the process, once I've kind of finalized my idea and kind of gotten down what I wanted, and I'm not trying to figure out what I want, then I'll find reference based off of what I want my more final image to be. Still leaving room to be surprised by the shapes that happen, but having some reference can kind of help guide. And an artist named Steven Zapata kind of talks about this a lot, where you're not really, you yourself aren't actually making the thing makes itself, and you're simply a vessel for which your mind expresses its subconscious in a way. You are the tool for your subconscious, if that makes sense. And in that same way, I try to not be limited by what I want, and rather what the shapes that are there want. That might sound weird, but yeah. Because I don't really, at least for me personally, I never really want to make a specific thing. I just kind of let myself create a thing. Also, make sure to put in ears when you're sculpting faces pretty early on, before you do too much detail in the head, because they can be easy to forget, but they can make your whole sculpt look weird. And it's kind of funny, because sometimes I'll just be sculpting the face and be like, this doesn't look quite right. And then I'll remember that people have ears, and as silly as that sounds, it happens a lot. So, yeah. And like I mentioned earlier, by reacting to the shapes, if you notice, something kind of went loopy with the brush there, but I really liked that kind of feathery look, so I end up using that and expanding on it a bit later on. I'm not really sure why it happened, but I liked it, so I ended up going over it with the smooth brush and hold control to increase detail and have those shoot out a lot more. And I'm starting to get more towards my kind of final idea, so you can see that the shapes are starting to change a lot less. So there are still some basic changes, but those are more to enhance what's already there. rather than making new shapes. So really another important part for butts is the sternocleidomastoid, which is the muscle that connects from the kind of like the bottom front of your neck near your sternum and towards the back side of your head, and that creates a really interesting and very important shape, because if you don't have that, it'll look weird, but it'll also kind of look fragile in a way. So yeah, again, I'm just going over the shapes that I already have and trying to really solidify those and make them really strong. And I'm trying to go for a similar style to a piece that I did earlier, which you can find on my Instagram, which I'll put in the link in the description. So yeah. Again, like I mentioned for that feathery look earlier, I'm trying to just experiment with different ways that I can achieve that. So then I can go back over and sculpt those down, because they do kind of get in the way a little bit, especially for like retopology and stuff. Those just, yeah, you can't have those. Yeah, and also, before you make like big changes, one, save, and also if there's an idea that you like that you need to get rid of for some amount of time but want to keep later on, I would suggest is taking a picture and keeping that in mind for when you're doing the rest of your sculpting. Because as you're sculpting, it's really easy for that idea to get lost. But it's really easy for those ideas to get lost. So keeping in mind your original ideas is good. Oh, another really important part on the face is that little gland in the corner of your eye, because that creates like almost like a horseshoe shape around the eyelids, which is really important it's just a really important part of the eye, and it'll kind of look weird if you don't have it. And if you can see here, I'm starting to get towards that more final look that I had in my final render. I'm not very like whiny and kind of plainy look. Because something that I really like is just flowy lines. I'm not really sure why. Well, I do know why, because it's like a basic fundamental part of being a human being, but I just love incorporating them. So just like S curves, C curves, and just curves that flow into each other really well. So one of the curves that I really like here is from that cheekbone around the jaw and then around the eye. I love that one. It really gets me going, you know? I'm mostly just trying to like simplify, or not simplify, but clean up my shapes so that they read as what they're supposed to be without any extra input. Because even those like subtle undulations of bad topology can make your whole sculpt seem kind of unpolished, which I would say my final renders definitely feel very unpolished, but I mean, it's the best that I can do right now, so yeah. And that's often where retopology comes in handy, because in the process of covering your sculpt in planes, you can often get rid of a lot of those details, which is bad for things that you kind of need it for, like little wrinkles and stuff, but it also means that you kind of have a blank slate to start from with no extra little things to distract you. So it's not good to do and leave it for later, but it works, so yeah. Like, I'd probably recommend just taking your sculpt as, not necessarily as far, but making it as clean as possible as early on, so then you don't have to leave as much work for later. But yeah, I'm not that good, or neither do I have the patience for that, so. So I believe this was roughly like 2 or 3 hours of sculpting, so. So I believe this was like 3 hours of sculpting probably. So don't be worried about how long it takes to sculpt, because this took a while, so. Okay, so now it's pretty much done, and then I'm just moving on to retopology, which I skipped over mostly, but if you want an in-depth video, then leave a comment, and I can try to make one of those. But yeah. Main thing is plan out your loops, and don't go into super tiny details, which I kind of did on the face, but for this use case that was kind of necessary, because if not, then I would have gotten some weird, like, yeah, this was a very specific use case for the topology that I have. Because especially since there are lots of really sharp edges, I really needed my topology to follow that, or else it would just look I would have too much just bad topology, and it would kind of follow my original sculpt in gridways, which I really don't want. In general, what I'm trying to do here is keep as much resolution as I can in the face and keep as little resolution in places that I don't need it. So for example, that chest area, or the top of the chest, and yeah, mostly there. Making those as low poly as I can is generally a good idea, because if you don't need it, then you're just wasting unnecessary power, which you could be using towards more resolution on your face. Or not necessarily the face, but the places that you want the most attention. Because the main reason that I'm doing this, it's not for like any rigging or anything, but just to bake my textures too, so the topology doesn't need to be good by any means. Obviously it needs to be decent, but yeah. Yeah, so after this, I just kind of set up my lights and bake my textures, so. So what I'm doing here is I'm just using a shrink wrap modifier with a multi-res, and then shrink wrapping, putting the shrink wrap below the multi-res so that the subdivided model sticks to my original sculpt. And like I said earlier, I keep the resolution just high enough to where I get all the detail that I want, but low enough to where I get rid of a lot of those, like a lot of the noise from my original sculpt. So I think in this one it was roughly 3 subdivisions, and then I subdivided it once more, but after I applied the shrink wrap. So that gave me a smooth finish. And I would really suggest making copies of your sculpts before you do major changes, because sometimes if you lose your undo steps, then you just lost all your work, and the only option then really is to exit out and then hope you saved at the right spot, which I had to do a couple times, because yeah, don't be like me. And so here I'm just using my retopologized mesh and then re-sculpting in some of the details that I lost, like the creases and some of the sharp edges. Like one of the parts that I really want to get is that inset around the eyes, because that was a really important part that I wanted to get down. Again, I'm not using any, like, actually I probably could have used more reference for the sculpt, but I'm not really going off of a concept or anything, so it is a bit unpolished. It's also really important to get your eyes in early on, because the eyelids form around the eyes. Who knew? But sometimes if you don't have those, then the eyelids can be kind of flat and it just won't look right, so get those in early. That's also why it's important to start with your bony landmarks and often a socket for the eyes, because the eyes go in the socket. There's not really any question about where it should go, because the eyes go in the middle of the socket, so yeah. Like, oh, where does the nose go? It goes at the nose hole. So yeah, get in your bony landmarks. Something that I did struggle with for this sculpt, I will say, is striking a good balance between it being feminine. And here I'm just doing my lighting, so yeah. And this is just kind of my initial lighting. It changes a little bit, but looking at your model with at least something close to your final lights is always a good idea, because you do lose a lot of detail. So sculpting with your lighting in mind can be really helpful. So here I'm just using my skin shader, which you can check my last video about, and you can also find it on Gumroad, which I'll leave in the description. So if you want to check that out, I think it'll be free for another couple days. But yeah, so I'm just using that to get a good base for my skin. And then one thing that I add is just another, what is it? The geometry node with the pointiness value. And I use that to create some little lines around some of those sharp edges, because I think that looks pretty cool. Oh yeah, if you want to pick up that skin shader, then again, it'll be available on my Gumroad. Yeah, I was trying really hard to make this not look like the Vision, so yeah, I wanted to go with green, but again, it looks like Vision, so I decided to go with a purple, which I think looks really good in the end, but yeah. Yeah, I mostly decided to not use my bump node, again, which is fully procedural, but except for some basic pores, because when it just took way too long to calculate and it was really slow in the viewport, but also just didn't feel necessary, so yeah. And then after I kind of finish that up, I just bake them out, because again, ambient occlusion takes a really long time to calculate, and it was really slowing down my viewport, like often to the point where Blender would just crash if I tried to do anything in the cycles viewport. So yeah, I just baked those. It's the eternal struggle between getting good results and Blender crashing. is the struggle of working on a 5-year-old laptop. Sigh. And if you guys have any recommendations for stuff that you want to see in my Gumroad, then feel free to leave a comment with what kind of stuff you want to see. Whether it be like blend files with sculpts or materials, or yeah, let me know. And in between I added some like feathers and eyebrows, and yeah. So for this one, I'm just kind of going for like a pink theme, because I think pink and dark skin go really well together, so I want to kind of explore that. And like I mentioned during the sculpting part, how I took a picture of the thing that I wanted to keep before I sculpted it down, because I had all that weird stuff from my standard brush. So that's what I'm trying to recreate here with the hair system. Or that's what I did recreate on the bottom part for the shirt. Yeah, now I'm just doing a like ponytail thing, so. Yeah, I didn't feel like spending a long time on the hair, so ponytail it is. And it's also important to keep in mind that you don't have to just use one particle system, which I kind of struggle with. But yeah, so for the main bulk of the hair on the head, I used one particle system, and then for the other, I just used a plane. So don't constrict yourself if you don't need to. This hair isn't like good by any means, but I feel like it does the job and gets across the idea that I want, so yeah. So I just kind of fiddle around with that, and then fiddle around with some like roughness and stuff, and then here are the final renders. Yeah, so if you can see more on my Instagram, which will be in the link in the description, and then if you want to check out my Gumroad, that will also be in the link in the description. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, bye!